All right, welcome to a new episode of the Zero Technique podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Stern, and joined with me, as always, is Jared Zero. How you doing tonight, Jared?
I'm doing excellent, Ryan. Thank you for asking. How are you doing yourself?
Doing great. So you can follow the show on Twitter at Zero Tech Pod. Make sure you're following, and also on Facebook. Go to the Zero Technique Football Podcast. Make sure you're following Backsports page on all social media at Backsports page, including Facebook. You could be watching this live on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live as part of the Backsports page podcast network and web show network. Make sure you're checking out everything that is going on over at www.backsportspage.com. All right, so it's been 2 weeks since we have talked, and since then we have seen an incredible video that was put out by the NFL, some of the NFL players. A lot of it was brought upon by Saquon Barkley, and there were a couple others that had a big hand in it. And since then, we have seen Roger Goodell come out and basically apologize on behalf of the NFL for not listening to black players in the past. And this was a very nonchalant dig at how they handled the Colin Kaepernick situation.
Yeah, it was to say it was insulting, I feel would be a little too harsh, but I also feel like it's fitting. I feel like Roger Goodell's apology just wasn't as sincere. I feel as though if he were to, really mean what he said, and if he was to really want the players to stand by him, especially in such a troubling time where a lot of people don't know what statements are sincere by certain organizations and which ones are. I feel if he wanted to make more of an impact, the first thing he would have done is apologize directly to Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of feels too little too late. It did feel forced. But he was also in a no-win situation, but it was a no-win situation that he put himself in. I know the last time that we had spoken, we were saying that he needed to come out and make a statement. And yeah, he made a statement, but again, like I said, a little too late, but he would have gotten even more flack had he not made a statement. And I think there are too many people that are going out and that they were saying, why hasn't Goodell made a statement? Why hasn't Goodell made a statement? And then sort of ragging on him for the statement that he made. And you know what? I mean, you can definitely see how people would see that way, but some of it is a little hypocritical. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's because of their non-compliance towards listening to the Black Lives Matter movement in 2017, when this whole thing with Colin Kaepernick started, is the reason why he was in the situation that he put himself into.
No doubt. And that's, and I think that's where a lot of people stand is like you said, he did make a statement, but too little too late, right? It's almost like those are empty words. Now he really needs to push for it. And one thing that I think is sort of a step in the right direction for Goodell is he just came out recently and advocated for Colin Kaepernick to get his job back in the NFL. After that came out, I noticed that the Chargers said that they could bring him in for a workout and that, he's the type of quarterback they're looking for in terms of his particular skill set. Obviously, he's been out of the league for 3 years now, so when they say that he's the type of quarterback they're looking for, I don't know if they're going based off of his performance when he was playing or, if they've maybe been in contact with his agent or whatever and kind of by word of mouth.
Yeah, so I read that statement with the Chargers, and the statement sort of made it sound like that they're interested in him, but they haven't had any contact with him. And again, this now feels like if you're going to make a statement like that, or is a team just going to sign him because they they sort of feel pressured now by the NFL to have someone sign him? And I don't think that solves anything. If he gets signed just for the sake of getting signed, I think that almost defeats the whole purpose. What we need is for a team to come out and say, listen, we think Colin Kaepernick has had a
Ryan, I think we lost you. Um, you're a little bit frozen there. Well, until Ryan, returns and he unfreezes, I might as well. One thing I did want to ask for the people who are watching, for Kaepernick, right? Like Ryan was in the direction he's going. I'm pretty sure he's going to say we need to see him more than just being signed to have this be important. Obviously, if he gets signed and he's a third string quarterback, it's not really going to hold much merit. I don't foresee a situation. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick situation, Cam Newton situation is leaps and bounds different. But Ryan is back.
So
there we go.
It's life on the road. Unfortunately, I'm away on business right now, and there's only so much that someone can do while trying to maintain a hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah. No, I was just kind of saying to the people who are watching, I think the direction you were going is saying that for Colin Kaepernick, he can't just be signed as a third string quarterback and then left on the bench.
Right.
I think, and I was going to ask right before you joined back, obviously Kaepernick's situation and Cam Newton's situation are drastically different. And Cam Newton still doesn't have a job. Do you think that if Colin Kaepernick signs as a backup, it holds merit, or do you think he comes back as a starter?
Unfortunately, because of the fact that I don't know if I necessarily mean unfortunately, but because of the fact that he has been out of the league 3 years, I don't think there's going to be a team in the NFL that's going to sign him and just hand the reins over to him as a starter. He's going to have to earn it in training camp. And now this could be a benefit for him. It also could be a negative for him with the fact that not only is he going to, if he does get signed by a team, is he going to go into a new situation with a new coaching staff, with a new system, and he's going to have to learn everything right away. Now, I think that if he's going into a situation, maybe, again, you mentioned Cam Newton. What about Carolina? Carolina has Teddy Bridgewater, who is going to be new to that situation. They have another quarterback, who's it, David Moore, I believe, who started a couple games last year and didn't really impress anybody. I think that would be a situation that if Kaepernick is able to come in and show that he has what he had in that run that led the 49ers to the Super Bowl. Now, again, the last year that he played as a starter, he wasn't necessarily that effective. A lot of it had to do with the team around him was awful. The offensive line was awful. And it just was not a good statistical year for Colin Kaepernick. And I think that sort of gave a leg up to those people who were saying, oh, well, the reason why he's not in the league is because he's not a good quarterback anymore. It has nothing to do with his protest, which I think we all know is BS. Because there are plenty of backup quarterbacks in the league who can't hold Colin Kaepernick's jockstrap as an athlete. But you mean to tell me that Colin Kaepernick can't go into Carolina and give Teddy Bridgewater a run for his money as a starting quarterback? I think that would be the best situation if he wants to really earn a spot as a starting quarterback. That would be the one team that I would have in mind.
So I don't disagree with you there about the Panthers. And I think you were getting DJ Moore mixed up with the backup not Kyle Allen anymore. He's with the Redskins. Will Grier, the rookie that they drafted years ago. But at this point,
I think the quarterback that they had that started a couple years followed Ron Rivera to Washington.
Yes, Kyle Allen is the one that follows them too. However,
that's right, Will Grier.
I don't disagree with Carolina. I think Carolina would be a good spot for Kaepernick, but I honestly think that the Chargers are the best bet. And I'm not just saying that because they're the first team to come out and say anything. Tyrod Taylor hasn't started in how many years now? And they have a rookie who they drafted in the first round this year. If Colin Kaepernick had the best opportunity of being a starter coming back into the league, I think it's fighting for that starting job in Los Angeles. I think with the Chargers, Tyrod Taylor is going to be stepping it up. He wants to prove that he still has it, right? Justin Herbert wants to prove that he has it. He's a rookie. He wants to be like, look, I know this is my first year in the league, but I want that starting job. And then if they were to sign Colin Kaepernick to the practice or to whatever, to have him fight for that starting role, it would also kind of boost his want to be better. And to your last point about, his last year statistically not being the greatest due to having a bad offensive line, bad receivers, whatever, I genuinely believe that if he was put on the 49ers now, if you replace Jimmy Garoppolo, Colin Kaepernick now, I think the 49ers are still a playoff team. I think that team is good enough with Colin Kaepernick at the reins. So
my only question would be, what sort of physical shape is he in to come in and fight for a starting job right away? And what mental state is he in? Does he even want to come back to the NFL after being away for so long? Does he think that maybe if he comes back, it's going to look like a cop-out? Maybe it looks like he's re-signing with the devil by coming back to the NFL, the league that sort of ambushed his career. Is it something that he still wants? We haven't heard any statement from Colin Kaepernick about what his plans are. And I think the longer we go without hearing from Colin Kaepernick, the more it leads me to believe that maybe he doesn't want to come back.
And that's a fair point, right? Obviously, like you said, we haven't heard anything from him, so we don't know where his head is at. Obviously, we know last season he did want to come back. He had that meeting with everybody, whatever. Nothing came of it. He had workouts, so obviously I think he's still interested. But if I'm Colin Kaepernick, I'm coming back and I am making a statement. If I'm him, I am coming back to the NFL and I am making a statement. And I am proving to everybody that said, oh, he's not in the NFL because he sucks or whatever. And I'm showing them up. I'm saying, well, you guys don't think I'm in the league because my stats were bad. But what are they going to say if he goes on and brings whatever team to a divisional round or a championship round, or as far fetched as it might sound, is maybe even a Super Bowl, right? It's just, I think the I want revenge isn't the right term. I feel like the animosity and resentment he has built up towards the NFL for how they did handle his situation back in 2017, I think he uses that as motivation to kind of push himself to want to prove the league wrong, that wronged him in 2017. I think he does it to prove the people wrong who doubted him and who said, oh, he's not in the league because he's bad. So I think if I were him, I would 100% want to get back in.
Yeah, you also don't know. That there were the whole legal issues that he was suing the NFL over. I don't know if you can necessarily call it wrongful termination, but the fact that he was trying to sue them because he felt that it was the NFL that was, as a league, that was keeping him from having a job, not necessarily any of the teams. But now let's look a little bit deeper into what Goodell had said. And again, a lot of this has to come with the fact that there are players that are being very, very, very outspoken. And it brings now to light all of these coaches that are saying that they're going to either support the players that kneel or even kneel with them. And that's something that in 2017, when this whole thing started, nobody could even fathom that a coach would even come out and be in support of the kneeling or actually go along with the kneeling as well.
Right. And, we saw it in 2017, in 2018, when teams were kneeling, when the protests were at their highest. And one example that comes to mind for me is the New England Patriots. I remember that first game of the season, the entire team, including Brady, took a knee. Everybody did. And Belichick, obviously, he didn't kneel, but he stood with his arms locked with everybody, Josh McDaniel. So the coaches were a part of that protest. And so to say it's unfathomable to think of a coach kneeling with the players, I don't necessarily see that. In some instances, I think, they're trying to make themselves look better. In the case of Bill O'Brien, he says he's going to kneel with his players and he's in support of them. And I think that's because he's trying to make up for the idiocy from this offseason in terms of trading DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's doing it not – he might believe it's the right thing to do. He but I think he's more so doing it because he kind of wants to be back in the good graces of everybody. I think for him it's more so about, well, people weren't a big fan of the trades that I made or the decisions or the things I've said back during the off season. So if I do this, maybe it'll make me look better type of mentality. I mean, I could be 100% wrong. Who knows? But that's how I view it.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously discussed on this show the bad turns that Bill O'Brien has made over this offseason. Just some of the head scratching moves, and the fact that he traded away DeAndre Hopkins and got back Brandon Cooks in a separate trade, and all he netted from it was jumping up 2 rounds. But and I can definitely see where you're coming from. I don't necessarily think that the reason that Bill O'Brien was the first coach to come out in support of the kneeling and say that he was going to kneel with his players if that's what they chose to do, I don't think that it was necessarily in reaction to what has happened over the course of this offseason. I think that he and don't think that J.J. Watt doesn't have anything to do with it. JJ Watt has such an enormous voice throughout the entire league. And I think that if JJ Watt gets into Bill O'Brien's head that, hey, listen, this is something that we need to be on the forefront. We need to make sure that we're ahead of the game. We're ahead of the rest of the league and make sure that we're getting out there and showing our support. Again, I can't guarantee that JJ Watt didn't have anything to do with it, but I would not be surprised if he did.
Well, neither would I. And I'm assuming you saw his tweet from a couple of days ago where, the Texans Twitter, said something along the lines of, oh, we're going to kneel in solidarity with the movement and everything else. And someone tagged JJ Watt and said, well, I bet you're not going to catch JJ Watt kneeling during any of the games. And he actually replied to them. And he said, for one, don't speak for me. And two, I will absolutely be kneeling during the game. And to me, that's, and like you said, he has such an enormous voice in this league and in the Texas organization. And I think for a player like JJ Watt to be a part of the protest and be a part of the movement, I think inspired a lot of people. And you can see it in players like Baker Mayfield, right?
I was just going to bring him up.
Baker Mayfield, he tweeted, he said, he was like, I was blind to it before. I didn't understand it, but now I do. And from here on out, I can start doing the right thing, or, whatever he said. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but, he admitted that he before didn't support the movement because he was uneducated. And now that, he sees a player like JJ Watt, and now that he did educate himself, now he does support it. So I think that seeing a tweet like that from such a big figurehead in the league like JJ Watt definitely helped a lot of other players become more comfortable with the idea of supporting the protests.
Yeah, and so this goes along with one of your other points with JJ Watt, where he came out and said, "Don't speak for me." It was on Baker Mayfield's Instagram, and someone said, I think it was along the lines of, "Don't tell us that you're going to be one of the kneelers." And he came out and absolutely was in standing in lockstep with the teammates alongside him who have dealt with the racial injustice, who are supporting the movement. And again, Baker Mayfield doesn't have a clean past. So we can't just look past that maybe he has a little bit of animosity towards the police system. I mean, he I don't know if you saw the video when he was in college where he was tried to run away from a cop resisting arrest and got tackled worse than any hit he's taken in the NFL or in college. But yeah, I mean, Baker Mayfield he's taking that next step that you want to see your franchise quarterback take. It's a move of leadership. It's a move of solidarity. It's something that right now in the locker rooms, which are majority black players right now,
right,
and they are the majority on the Cleveland Browns, where he needs to make sure that he has the support of his team. And for him to be vocal about it, it was very encouraging.
Well, that to bring up to your point about the locker room and making sure that the locker room understands, I want to bring it back to Drew Brees. I know we talked about it a couple weeks ago, last time we were on, but he obviously issued his apology. He actually stood up to, Donald Trump about, I guess after he issued the apology, Donald Trump tweeted at him or whatever it was, and told him, you don't need to apologize for, your opinion or whatever, something like that. And Drew Brees said, no, I do have to apologize because we as a community need to be better. And I 100% believe that is the type of change, the team needed to see from him. And I told you this last week that I think the comments that he did make were going to affect the locker room chemistry. But I now think that when his teammates see that, okay, he's not just apologizing publicly to make himself look better, he's actually standing up to, President Trump, who Drew Brees is known to support. It makes it a little bit different. It makes it more genuine. It makes it feel a lot more real. So do you think there's still going to be animosity in that locker room?
I don't think it's going to go away that easily. I think Drew Brees took the necessary steps he needed to take in order to gain back whatever trust he had lost within the locker room. I can't speak for everyone in that locker room or anyone, but he did what he needed to do to begin the transition of regaining the trust.
Yeah, I could see that. And, I just think it's nice to see that a lot of people are coming out and saying, and this doesn't even just stick to NFL players. I mean, I've seen it with people that I'm personally friends with as well, who are coming out and saying, you know what, I wasn't educated before and I'm sorry but that it took me so long, but I'm here now. I do support it. So I do think that where, the NFL is heading is in the right direction. And as you know, I do a new show called The Trifecta on Fridays, and I was talking to Tyrone and Ahmed about this. The NFL, I think, needs to become similar to the NBA in the sense that it's a players' league. The players in the NBA, obviously, some of the antics similar to like Kyrie or whatever, I'm not necessarily agreeing with, but it is a players' league where the players' voices matter. And I think the NFL needs to follow suit with that. Because, yeah, certain players like a J.J. Watt or, now a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady, they can say whatever they want. They'll get whatever they want. But I don't think that they could make a statement strong enough that the rest of the league will follow suit, where like LeBron James could.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right that the NBA is definitely run by the players. I think that the NFL owners have too much power for that to necessarily be the standard that is reached by the NFL players. There's just too much outside money that that the NFL brings in, and that the owners have, that for them to really take over. I mean, we can even get into a little bit with the NBA and who thinks who is right. Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets, who this is the most confusing part about why is it Kyrie Irving that's coming out and being the voice of why the NBA shouldn't restart because of the Black Lives Matter protests. Kyrie Irving is injured and he's not going to be a part of the Brooklyn Nets playoff run, and he's not even going to be allowed to go down to Orlando. Now, does this have any sort of is this part of the reason why he's so out forth in the NBA not coming back? Because he's not going to be a part of it. He's not going to have a chance to be a part of a winning team this year. I mean, obviously the Nets are a good team. They're nowhere close to being a championship team without Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant.
You hit the nail on the head. I 100% believe that Kyrie Irving is actually backtracking from what he said and no longer wants to play because he's not going to be a part of that team come, the playoff bubble, they're calling it. And the crazy thing to think about is that Kyrie Irving is the vice president of the NBA PA. And he originally voted for the return. So I think that it 100% has to do with him not going to be a part of that team. And, it's frustrating to him. And it doesn't really make sense to me. I think that obviously I understand the whole not wanting to play because you're afraid of getting sick, whatever. I get that, right? Everybody has their feelings towards, the virus and the pandemic we're in right now. And rightfully so, right? One of my best friends just had a baby. He doesn't want to leave his house. He doesn't want to have guests until the numbers start dropping. Understandable. Other people I know want to go out to eat at restaurants and go shopping. And, I'll admit I went out shopping the other day because I needed new things. Everyone is entitled to that. But, we've seen it so many times in the NBA where players have used their platform for social justice, such as LeBron James, and we see it very often in that league. And so I feel by not playing and saying it's because of the protests, I feel just doesn't sit well with me. And the only reason I'm going to say that is because everybody's going to be watching sports. Everybody wants sports back. Right. And so if the athletes take their time and during the pregame, during the game by wearing it on their jerseys or on their sneakers or whatever in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, then that message is going to get across to far more people than to not. So I think I'm on the side that I think they should play.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Black Lives Matter movement should have nothing to do with the return to play. It should be strictly based on whether or not it is safe for all of these players to come back and get right back into the playoffs. In terms of the movement, I think you're absolutely right. This is the perfect time for the NBA players who want to get word out about the move. Obviously, everyone knows about how they feel and where their mindset is in terms to the protests and everything like that. But to not play because they think that it's going to take away from the protest. I mean, I don't know if you saw on ESPN the other day, they had a program called Return to Sports. Mike Greenberg did an excellent job. He spoke to the commissioners of all of the pro major sports in the United States, and there were also a couple players that were on it. And Damian Lillard does not get enough credit for what he does on and off the court. He's been a model citizen. He's been great for the league, and nobody talks enough about him. Again, this may be coming from the wrong person because, I mean, the NBA is clearly my fourth amongst the four major sports, but I still know enough about it to be able to voice an opinion about it. And Damian Lillard needs to be used as more of a face of the league than he has. He came out and he was so well spoken when he was saying that this is a perfect time for us to come back and use our voices for the betterment of the movement.
I agree with you 100%. And as somebody, the NBA is probably my second, favorite out of the four major sports. Football, obviously, being number one. But Damian Lillard, from everything that I've seen, he gets enough on the court credit, right? He does get enough of that. I think he deserves a little bit more, but I think the amount that he gets is fair. But you hit the nail right on the head with that. He does not get enough credit off the court for how he is, and it's really really unfortunate.
So we will definitely be getting into just everything that's going on. Make sure that you're staying tuned. You can now subscribe directly to the Zero Technique Football Podcast on all, I know, on Apple and on Spotify. In the search bar, type in the Zero Technique Podcast, and you'll be able to directly subscribe to our channel. The shows we do record live via StreamYard on Wednesday nights, and the podcast will hopefully be up there on Thursday morning for everyone to download if that's your preference for listening to our show. We are hoping to get on John Laub from footballdiehards.com. I know that he had just sent me a message that the podcast that he records is running a little late. He does a college football fantasy podcast called On Campus, which is it's one of the shows that I listen to. I'm a big podcast nut. I'm on the road a lot, so I'm in the car, and sometimes you just need to get away from music. And so I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and John always has shows that I am listening to. We're hoping that he can join us for a couple minutes when he is done. If not, we will try and get him on next week. But we will continue with our top 5 segment. And today we are going into the top 5 running backs right now in the NFL. So Jared, let's hear your number 1.
I feel like this would be pretty obvious. I'm going with my boy Christian McCaffrey. That dude is something else, right? He just is so dynamic whenever he touches that football. To be only the third ever running back to accomplish 1,000 yards or 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in the same season, when the last to do it was in 1999 by Marshall Faulk, I think that is amazing. I don't know if there is a downside to Christian McCaffrey. He's out of the backfield. He is the best receiving running back in the league. He just is the complete package of everything you want in a running back. And the kid's healthy. I mean, he hasn't had an issue with injuries yet so far. And, a lot of people were saying last season, they're overworking him because they didn't have, Cam Newton to kind of take some of the pressure off. But, I mean, now that they have Teddy Bridgewater, who is an active quarterback in the pocket, he can run the ball. I think that, Christian McCaffrey's longevity is up there. I think he has a long time in the NFL, and as of right now, he's my number 1.
Yeah. So crazy stat that I just heard. If you, in terms of fantasy purposes, if you only took Christian McCaffrey's receiving stats, he would have been the 11th best wide receiver in the NFL last year.
That's insane. And
he was the 11th best wide receiver. And then he also puts up 1,400 plus rushing yards. I mean, so Christian McCaffrey is my number 1. Christian McCaffrey is someone that I was wrong on. I was very weary of his ability to withstand a bell cow workload. Uh, the the system that they ran in at Stanford was very zone outside the tackle, and I didn't think he'd be able to handle going up the middle 7, 10, 12 times a game. And then you look at some of these videos that Christian McCaffrey posts on Twitter of his workouts. This kid is built like a rock. I thought and that could be that's on me for not digging deeper into what sort of physical shape he actually was in. But as small as he is, I think he's proven to the entire world that he is certainly capable of withstanding that workload. So, yeah, Christian McCaffrey is number one for me.
My number two, this one's a toss-up for me. I mean, there are so many great running backs in the league right now, and I think for anybody who watches the NFL, consistently, for somebody who does enjoy the sport, I think we are blessed with the number of. I'll even go out there and say elite running backs that we do have in the league. But I think I'm going to put my number two as Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara had obviously a bad season. No, it wasn't even a bad season, we'll say, but it was a lower than expected performance-wise season for him. And I think it's because, he was trying to adjust to before he had that 1-2 punch with Mark Ingram with the Saints. And then, you kind of take that away from him. So he's adjusting to a different role. But I mean, since he's been in the league, I mean, he's consistently been one of the best running backs that we have seen. He's been one of the most successful and one of the most consistent in terms of his stats. So to see how he adjusts to that, new role without kind of that 1-2 punch combo and stuff like that, I want to give him another season before I kind of move him up or down. And so for now, he's my number two.
And my number two is Saquon Barkley. To amass the amount of production that he has over his first 2 years in the NFL with the offensive line that he's had to run behind is mind-boggling. There are so many times where he gets hit in the backfield where any other running back in the league would have gone down for a 3-4 yard loss, and he gets back to the line of scrimmage or gains a yard. And you look in the stats and you see, oh, okay, he had a 1 yard gain here. What's up with that? It's because of his incredible size and speed combination that it's not a negative 4 yard loss. His ability to just absolutely break away from anyone at the size that he has. I mean, we've all seen the picture with him his rookie year in those short black shorts with the quads just bursting out and prompting Odell Beckham Jr. to anoint him with the nickname Saquads. I mean, his quads could feed a small country. His ability to be that big and that fast just shouldn't happen in a human being, and I'm excited to see how he performs this year because the Giants did a great job of improving the offensive line in terms of the ability to run block. Also pass block, but especially in the running game with the drafting of Andrew Thomas. It's going to be able to move Nate Solder over to the right side. I think I think the Giants' ultimate plan is to have Shane Lemieux, their fifth round pick from this year, move from guard to center. I think if he can play as well at center as he did at guard for Oregon, and they also have Cam Irving that they brought in. Hey, this is going to be a telltale season for Saquon Barkley, and I think we're in store for a big one from him.
Saquon's my number 3. I wanted to put him at number 2, and that's why I said it was a toss-up. But like I said, I want to see the consistency from Kamara first to see if that keeps up. But you can ask anybody that knows me. When I saw Saquon coming out of college, the first thing I said about him is he is going to be the greatest running back that has ever played the game of football. That's what I said about him, and I still stand by that. Obviously, right now, Christian McCaffrey is a better running back, but Saquon, like you said, his legs are huge. They're about the size of my head. Like, that's crazy. And again,
you must have a big head.
but like you said, the speed with those sized legs is unrivaled by anybody else in the league. And again, like you said, getting hit in the backfield as often as he does and still turning it into a gain, or at least, just back to the line of scrimmage, is so impressive. And, obviously, back to the point I made about Kamara, Barkley's season was a little bit, underwhelming compared to his rookie year. But we see that far more often than people think. And I don't think that is anything against him. I mean, he was injured for a little while.
Yeah. Missed two and a half games with the ankle injury, and you could tell he wasn't right the first couple weeks that he came back. But the second half of last season, especially like the last 4 games, you could tell that he was back in Saquon form.
No, absolutely, and that's where he thrives. Is he is a special type of running back, and so for me, he's my number 3.
My number 3 is somebody that I would love to see stay on the field more than he has been able to show in the past, because I think if he were to be able to stay on the field for a full 16-game season, he could be a record setter, and that's Dalvin Cook, Minnesota Vikings. He has it. There doesn't seem to be, when you look at him, there doesn't seem to be anything special about him. He doesn't have that top end speed. He doesn't have the big bruising size. He's an average speed, average size running back that just dominates whenever he gets a chance to play. And those kind of stories I love. I love to see the players, and he was one of those guys that he had a shot to be a first-round draft pick, and he goes to the combine and he performs so poorly, and he falls into the second round. And to see those kind of redemption stories, to see somebody take the negative that was his combine and turn it into the positive of what has been his NFL career, again, aside from injuries. So if we're taking injuries out of the equation, my number 3 is Dalvin Cook.
I dig it, Ryan. I do dig it. For me, my number 4, I think I'm going to have to give it to Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. For something that I've repeated numerous times, even today, I said it last week. Something that I love is consistency. Right. It is just something that, for me, if you can consistently show up, improve yourself every single game, and you can every season, you're consistently going above and beyond for your team, you are going to be better than the average person. And Joe Mixon is that. Since he's been in the league, he's had, 2 or 3 consecutive 1,000 rushing yard seasons? Obviously, he's not the best running back in the game. He's not the best running back on the field. There are probably, 10 other guys that are better than him. But for me, in my opinion, he's the most consistent. right? People would probably argue, what about Derrick Henry? What about this? What about this one? It's like, yeah, those guys are great, but they're not consistent. You don't see the consistencies from people like Derrick Henry, where you do see that with Joe Mixon. So Joe Mixon's my number 4th.
So it's fine because Derrick Henry is my number 4. You don't get to be the rushing champion by accident. Granted, a lot of it has to do with the scheme that allows him to succeed, but he just has that ability, and the player that he reminds me a lot of, but he has, I think, a little bit better of a skill set is Brandon Jacobs, because I think it in the first quarter you can say, all right, come on at me, Derrick Henry, I can tackle you. In the fourth quarter, defenders are terrified of tackling this dude. He can just roll over you, and he has the ability to, one, stay relatively healthy, and two, consistently maintain his energy throughout a game. I would love to see him be able to take on a bigger role in the passing game, but again, that necessarily isn't the way that Tennessee feels like they're going to succeed. If he can up his game in terms of the passing game, he can definitely jump up to number 2 for me. But right now, Derrick Henry is my number 4.
I respect that. I do. And that's why Derrick Henry is my number 5. You basically said it all. The first quarter, everyone's like, come on, we're going to tackle you. We're going to bring you down. And then, lo and behold, 3 quarters later, he's still running over you. You're not tackling him. Yeah. And we saw that all postseason. We saw it against the Patriots. We saw it against the Ravens. And the Ravens have one of the best defenses in the league. So it's just he just can, once he has his hands on that ball, you don't know what's happening with that. You don't know how you're stopping him. And so, and again, I'll say it again, consistency for me is key. I would love to see Derrick Henry repeat what he did last season. I would love to see it again from him. And he could, like you said, jump up to my number 2, my number 3, whatever it is. But for now, he is my number 5. But he is definitely one of the best running backs in the game.
So my number 5 is Ezekiel Elliott. And a lot of this has to do with the offensive line that he gets to run behind. I'm not taking anything away from Ezekiel Elliott, but you put a lot of running backs in the NFL running behind that offensive line, and they're going to be just as successful as Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Elliott has that over the last 2 years, he has elevated his receiving game to, I think, a level that most people didn't think was going to be part of his repertoire. And he is such an important part of that offense because of now this newfound dual threat ability, and the fact that you have a Cowboys offense who is probably going to be one of the, if not the top offense in the NFL this year. They always have a top offensive line. They now have 3 legit wide receivers with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. The biggest question mark is going to be what happens with Dak Prescott. It's now June 17th. They have 28 days to sign him. They have until July 15th to sign him to a long-term extension, or else we can see a holdout. We can see Dak Prescott technically be a lame duck, where he's going to because they're not going to be able to afford to pay him on a 2 franchise term next year. So with the franchise tags, what it is you get the average of the top 5 salaries at the position. If you're tagged for a second year in a row, you get that plus 20%. So I think the tag number this year was 34 million. So you're looking at 34. You're adding 20% to that. That's about 7 million. So that's $41 million. And I know that that's what Dak is going.
Oh, I think he froze again. I think Ryan froze again. Oh, goodness. Yep, he definitely froze. So, I'm not sure what else to talk about. I mean, for me, if I had to give honorable mention to anybody, it would be Aaron Jones, running back of the Green Bay Packers. I don't think he gets enough credit. I think for him being a 5th-round pick a couple years ago, I think he was a 5th-round pick in 2017. And for him in his 3rd season to have over 1,000 rushing yards with 16 touchdowns and additional almost 500 passing yards with 3 touchdowns, I think that is incredible. I don't know if you caught what I was just talking about. I was talking
just the tail end.
So I was giving my honorable mention to Aaron Jones.
Okay.
I think that for somebody to be a 5th-round pick in 2017, and then 3 years later to have over 1,000 rushing yards with 16 touchdowns, and just under 500 passing yards with 3 touchdowns, I think that's very impressive. Because it's so often are those late round picks overlooked, right? And very rarely do they get the credit they deserve. I mean, before Antonio Brown went crazy, I believe he was a 5th-round pick as well. Obviously the legendary story of Tom Brady being a 6th-round pick. So I think Aaron Jones definitely deserves a mention.
So I do have 2 guys that I think have a good chance at being in this top 5 next year. One of them is Miles Sanders from Philly. I think he's just going to have an absolutely huge year this year. And another one is rookie Jonathan Taylor with Indianapolis. Part of what I was saying with Ezekiel Elliott was the offensive line. The Colts offensive line may have eclipsed the Cowboys with the retirement of Travis Frederick as the number 1 offensive line in the NFL in my books. I think we're going to see early on a 50-50 split between him and Marlon Mack. And I think we're going to see Jonathan Taylor just pull away. And towards the end of the year, we're going to see exactly what Jonathan Taylor has. He was my favorite running back in this year's draft. Loved his landing spot. And I think that he has all the makings of being a top guy in the league.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And I mean, for me, I think one guy that I could potentially see breaking into my top 5 would be Chris Carson. Again, he is a total workhorse, and very similarly to Derrick Henry, it's hard to bring him down. He's a hard guy to tackle, but his issue is, fumbles, right? It's hard for him to hold on to the ball, but he sharpens that up. He tightens in. He gets a hold of that ball. He holds it on tighter, and works on that. I have no doubt in my mind he could be a top 5 running back.
So I know you had with your honorable mentioned Aaron Jones. I have a little bit of a grudge against Aaron Jones, and it's my own fault. So in my dynasty league, about a week or so before last season started, there was all the talks about Green Bay going to a 50-50 split between Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. We didn't know what we were going to see out of LaFleur's system, and that scared me a lot with Aaron Jones. And we also had the injury with Cam Newton, where I didn't know what was going to happen in terms of the development of the Carolina Panthers wide receivers. And I needed to get what I thought was a sure thing. So I traded Aaron Jones and DJ Moore for Le'Veon Bell.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I laugh at you for the next 10 minutes.
It was... And I was stoked. I was so happy that I made that trade because I was so sure that the Packers were going to be a 50-50 timeshare with Jones and Williams. And I was still okay. I mean, I like DJ Moore, but you know what? I actually have a really strong wide receiving core. So, you know what? Let's use. I don't know if DJ Moore is going to be able to crack into my lineup this year. So I'll just use that, and yeah, that bit me in the ass. But I do have Chris Carson on that team, so go Chris Carson.
There you go.
All right, so that's we're gonna wrap up the Zero Technique Football Podcast for this week. Want to make sure that everyone's checking out www.backsportspage.com for all the great content that's going up. Make sure you're following Backsports Page on all social media at Backsports Page. The show, once again, is on Twitter at Zero Tech Pod, and on Facebook, it's the Zero Technique Football Podcast. And I'm on Twitter at rstern33. Jared, where are you at?
I am on Twitter at journalistj0. It's right down there, right there. Yep, y'all can see it. That's where you can find me. I'm also on Facebook at Jared0. And like Ryan said, you can find me on Backsports Page. You can find Ryan on Backsports Page. All the great articles that are going up by a bunch of the amazing writers on the website.
There we go. So we are looking forward to having John Laub join us next week. We'll make sure that that the timing is set up where he can join us. John is such a great person to have on, especially in times that are going on right now. He's a history teacher, a history nut, and really analyzes things from a different point of view than what we could fathom coming from. Would love to hear his viewpoint on everything going on, and also how it will affect professional and college football. He's one of the better college football minds out there. So make sure you are staying tuned. Once again, also make sure you are subscribed to the Zero Technique podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you search the Zero Technique podcast. So until we meet again, Jared, have yourself a great week, buddy.
You as well, Ryan.